Episode 53 of the Pilot podcast takes off now.
David Campbell. I'm a 49-year-old private pilot that's aspiring to be a commercial pilot.
What is going on, Avination, and welcome back to the Pilot podcast. This is episode number 53 featuring David Campbell. David is a career changer. He started out going to Western Michigan and wanting to be a pilot, realized how expensive it was, and hey, college gets in the way. And then he decided to go to construction. And then at age 49, he decided to leave a $100,000 or more career to leave that and become a pilot. David is just the epitome of going after your dreams, of seeing a dream and wanting to do it. He's always wanted to be a pilot, and he didn't do it until he was 49 years old. Some of the things that we specifically talk about in this episode are how David has any regrets in the decision that he's made in the past. We talk about how he had a good friend who finished his training at Western Michigan but ended up quitting flying further down the line. We talk about how aviation is something that is going to rule your life whether you're a pilot or not. How an annual goal sheet helped David get back into aviation. How he used AOPA to find a local flight school. How seeing someone older than him complete his training helped David realize that this is a real possibility. And the importance of using your GI Bill to pay for your flight training. Avination, I hope you truly enjoyed today's episode. If you do, please leave us a review at iTunes. Check us out on Instagram at PilotThePilot, our website, pilotthepilothq.com. Or if you have any feedback, good or bad, let me know at pilotthepilothq@gmail.com. Avination, I also want to go ahead and throw it out there. Check out our Patreon page, patreon.com/pilotthepilot. We're going to be giving away some cool stuff there. We have $5, you get stickers. I'm going to create a new $10 one where you get a sticker and a keychain, which is to be determined later. I have some pictures up on Patreon, so go ahead and check it out. Please be a Patreon member. Let me know what you think of the podcast. I love creating this content, and my Patreon members really help me create this content. Avination, without further ado, here's David Campbell. Hey, David, thanks for coming on the Pilot podcast.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
No problem. Looking forward to talking with you. The email you sent me just kind of got me captivated, and I'm really interested to hear your story. Let's go ahead and start from the beginning. Why did you want to be a pilot? What made you want to switch from your $100,000 a year job to go into aviation at 49?
I had always wanted to be a pilot when I was, middle school, high school. We were lucky enough to do a little bit of traveling, flying for spring break with my parents and stuff like that. And I think the first time I ever got on a jet, I was just kind of captivated by it, like most of us are. And so that was kind of always my goal. Just ended up getting away from it. I actually went to college at Western Michigan and started in their aviation program and opted out of it after a year for various reasons, but always had in the back of my mind. Never knew I would get back to it, but just had the opportunity. So was at a time in my life where I was able to walk away from a great job and just pursue something that truly was my passion, and felt very lucky to do that. And am loving every minute of it so far.
Awesome. So you were at Western Michigan, which is a fairly big aviation school. So you went there for aviation to start out with, and then kind of some things came up and you decided to change. Do you have specific reasons why it changed? Was this kind of like money and time and all that?
I guess I didn't see how I was going to pay for all the flight time, and that was part of it. That probably really wasn't all of it. I started out and just struggled hard my first year in college, and I think more than anything else, I just wanted to make a change. And I had been working in construction, and that's what I changed over into. And that's been my career path for most of my life since then. But I saw the writing on the wall with all what it was going to cost, and then just being on the struggle bus trying to make grades and stuff. I think I just wanted to make a change.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I can't say that I regret it, because it's been a pretty good ride since then, but I'm just really happy that I'm able to get back into it now as well. I don't think I would have regretted staying in it either. So
definitely not. It's how long ago did you make that decision to leave aviation and focus on a different career?
So that would have been like 1988, 1989.
Okay. Well, it's just very interesting that kind of the same things happen today where people are complaining about how expensive it is, or they can't figure out a way to come up with the funds or the money, and how it's just a common thing. And it doesn't matter when you started aviation. Aviation's expensive. It's always been expensive and always will be expensive. And it's like you said, I think it's interesting how even though you took a step away from it, but it still called you back into it. So it's funny. It's like, I mean, who knows what your career would have been like if you did get into it at the time you did. Like, you never know about furloughs or any of that stuff or all that.
Right.
So you might be doing it at the right time. So, I mean, that's crazy that you're getting back into it, and that's awesome.
Yeah. And I had a pretty close friend that was in the aviation program there and ended up finishing it. And, that was back in the days when you got done and you were making 18 grand a year and he was on, he was on reserve for forever. I don't know. He ended up getting out of it, doing something else, getting back into it, got out of it again. He just couldn't make it a go. He had gotten married and had a family, and man, that's just tough to do. I mean, that's so he, to this day is not a pilot now, even though he, got his degree and started out. And
interesting.
So, who knows?
Well, yeah, I mean, aviation has its challenges on families, on personal life as is, even if it's perfect. So see, even if you're a captain of a 777 making crazy amounts of money, you're still going to have your family issues with aviation. You're still going to have to be gone for a while. You're still going to have to pack up and leave and miss stuff. But when you add in reserve, making 18,000, all these things that kind of go against you, and furloughs and all that, it really makes it hard on families. So aviation is definitely something that you have to become fully prepared to kind of almost give your life to, because it rules your life without a doubt. And it's also crazy how you both started aviation. You left aviation and came back to aviation, and then he continued aviation, then left aviation to do something else. So it's really funny how you guys kind of went total opposite ways, and now you're doing opposite things, which is just crazy. It's interesting. So tell me about the decision to leave your job. Tell me about kind of why you finally made the jump at the age you are now, and why you didn't want to do it earlier. Just kind of walk me through that process.
Yeah, that's it's a classic tale of the timing just being right and several things coming together. So I mentioned earlier I was in construction. That's what my degree is in. I was in that ever since I graduated college, minus some time I spent in the Marine Corps. But I had in the early and mid 90s started my own small little residential construction company and did a little land development and was trying to build that up. And then of course everything went in the crapper, and I got hit hard by that and lost. I had to shut down the business, lost just about everything. I was a single guy and I had everything I could put into the company and ended up losing that. And so it took me a little while to get back on my feet again, and I ended up having a connection out on I was back in Michigan at the time, but had a connection out on the East Coast and landed this just awesome job out here, and was working away at that, and really had done the complete 180, and when everything was back on track again. And my boss at the time was actually a very good friend of mine. He had all of us that worked for him do a annual. Do 3 things in your personal life, 3 goals, and then 3 business goals. And so, of course, my first personal goal was, well, I'm going to, now that things are going pretty good, I'm going to get back in aviation. I'm going to get my private pilot's license. So that was one of my goals that I started working on. So I did. I started flying while I was still with the company full time, and did the I'm working 60 hours a week and trying to fly on the weekends. And that started stretching out to where I was a year and a half into it and still hadn't done my check ride and all that sort of thing. And we had a kind of when I started at the company, we had an unwritten agreement that we were going to give 5 years. I was going to come out, and because it's a kind of a dog eat dog world in the construction business sometimes, and there's people coming looking for you. And so it was like, I want you to give 5 years. So I was kind of looking at that. The job I was on was just about being done, and the jobs tend to run 18 months to 2 years, something like that. And I was coming up on the 5-year mark, and I just decided, great job, love it, but it's not my passion. And I had been keeping an eye on the aviation world as I was working on my private pilot license, and just decided I am in the position where I can walk away and do something that I really love. And so I just went in one day and told my boss, I'm done after this job. I don't really have a plan, and I'm going to look into aviation, and we're going to go from there. And that's what started it. And he stood up, shook my hand, and we're good buddies to this day. And
I was about to say,
that was it.
What was his response? Was he like, "You're crazy. How are you going to start being a pilot now?" It's like, what are you doing? Or was he, like you said, was he pretty supportive right off the bat?
No, he was very supportive because we had talked about it. He kind of knew I was leaving. I mean, certainly there were others that had that exact response,
right.
But not from him. Not from him. We were pretty tight. We talked about stuff, and he just wants his people to be happy,
That's
and
awesome.
he knew that what I was doing wasn't my passion, and that aviation had become it, and so he was all for it.
Yeah,
so
that's good.
That makes it easy, certainly, when you're when you got to go in and tell your boss, and he's like, "That's awesome, do it."
Yeah, all right, man, see it. What did he? So when he came up with you and said, "Hey, come up with 3 things in your personal life, business life, of what you want to do," and you talked about private pilot license, and did you have any kind of thought that, hey, like once this came up, did you ever think that you would be able to quit your job to move on?
No, that was never a thought in the beginning. It really, I didn't go into it thinking it was going to be any kind of a job or anything like that. But once I got into it, and obviously you kind of immerse yourself when you're a student pilot, and you just you're a sponge for knowledge, and you keep hearing about this pilot shortage. And when I started, it was still like, there's not a pilot shortage. Oh, yes, there is. Blah blah blah. And then kind of got down the road and like, I think this thing is real, and started looking into it. I mean, I didn't have all the information, but when I left the job, I thought there would be some way I could make a living as a pilot. Didn't really know didn't have a goal, didn't have anything in mind other than, I think I can fly. I know that I have the skills and the smarts to probably be able to get there. So that's really all it started as. And then I really kind of pieced together. Another piece of great timing was I was reading AOPA magazine, and there was an ad in there for a local community college that has an aviation program, and got hooked up with them. And
cool.
They have an associate's degree program, and I had done at that point I had done pretty much all my private stuff, but they start you out from nothing, and then it goes private, instrument, commercial, semester by semester, and then you come out with your associate's degree, and hopefully all the way through your commercial cert. So
sweet.
Really learned a lot there because they have a pretty spectacular staff. The guy who runs it was colonel in the Air Force for 25 years, and they have a Navy test pilot instructor. They have a retired United Airlines pilot as another instructor. I mean, the guys are just, a wealth of knowledge. And so once I got locked in there, it kind of became clear, like, okay, this really can be a go. I expected to be the oldest guy in the class, being, I'm 49 now, and think, I don't know if I have enough time left for all this. I wasn't the oldest guy in the class, and in fact, one of the biggest moments that happened for me was the Navy test pilot instructor, great guy. He had a gentleman come in, had been an Army helicopter pilot, and I think he was 52 or 53, and he had just accepted a contract from one of the local regionals to start flying for them. So I'm like, okay, here's this guy. He's older than I am, and he can do really anything he wants because he's got the retirement from the Army, and he's got a part-time. I think he was a part-time professor there. I never had him for any classes, but and he's going this route. He's determined it's okay for him, and I'm like, man, that's me. That's me in a couple years. Oh. So that was finding out that the school had this aviation program, really inexpensive way to get. It's just nice to have the associate's degree. The restricted ATP comes a little bit quicker that way. But just grounding me in the aviation knowledge of how things really work was just huge for me that I happened to find that, and this was like shortly after I left my job. So. Yeah.
That's good. I mean, that's definitely something. Makes it relate to you because, like you said, you were 49. Or I don't know how old you were when you actually started, but it's kind of it's a task. You're like, all right, I have to retire at 65. I go to the airlines. You're crunching numbers. You're like, well, if I stay here, it's worth the money here, but I won't be as happy. And you kind of just get overwhelmed with these feelings and thoughts that it's not worth it, or I don't want to do it, or you can't do it. You feel like you physically can't do it because of the time left that you have, but you can do it. You can have a good career. Airlines are hiring, regionals are hiring, and who knows, but you might be able to be at a major airline by the time you retire and have a good career. So, I mean, there's definitely a good career in front of you. And there's also other jobs where you can fly over 65. You can work at 135 companies, and you can fly. Some pilots I've heard are 75, 80 years old. And I don't know if you want to work that long. Not many people do, but it is an option for you to do that. So it's definitely a good career path. Doesn't matter how old you, I mean, if you're 64, 65, maybe it might be a little too late, but it's never a bad thing to get into it. And the way it is right now, we don't know if it's always going to be like this because aviation, as everyone knows, is just like every other industry and probably a little bit more cyclical than every other industry. But it's at a great time to get in. It's at a great time to start training. So I think that you made a good choice. And I get a lot of emails from people or DMs on Instagram about, hey, I'm 25, I'm 29, I went to college, I'm an engineer, I'm whatever. I really want to get in aviation. Is it too late for me? Or how do I make the switch? Can you talk a little bit about because like we talked about earlier, it's a lot to take in. It's a lot to switch, especially if you have family, kids. Talk to me about kind of the process and thought process of you making the switch. Did you make like a pros and cons list, or did you just jump in?
Absolutely.
Yeah. What was kind of the pros and cons that you would say that most people kind of face when they come to switch careers?
Well, the major con and huge for me because, I was just 5 years away from having crashed my business and all, going through all that, to getting back on my feet again and making more money than I ever made before and living at a very, in a very comfortable way to, knowing that paycheck every 2 weeks was going to be there and wasn't going to bounce was a nice feeling. Mm-hmm. And you're leaving that behind, or at least, the route I chose, I left that behind. I had put enough money away to pay for a lot of the flight training. So my consideration was, I just got to make some money to pay for my day-to-day life. So those are the cons and the biggest consideration. I mean, obviously the pros are you're doing something you love, and it is true. They say, if you're doing something you love, you never go to work. And it's like when I went to the community college, I wasn't sitting in class. I was sitting in there listening to somebody talk about something I just loved and couldn't get enough of, So I think for that 25 or 30-year-old that's considering it, the biggest consideration is how are you going to pay for it? And see, now for me, I'm an anomaly. 49, never been married, engaged now, but never been married, don't have any kids. So, and I live with my fiance. She works as well. So that makes it a heck of a lot easier than knowing I've got an 18-year-old going to college next year, that sort of thing. Yeah. So, I can't speak to that because I don't know that I could have done it if I was in that scenario, or it would have to be a lot different. I mean, you just got to figure out the time and the money of it. If you get bit by the bug, I mean,
Lord help you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Lord help you. But I think if you're younger, first of all, yes, you do have a lot of time, barring something crazy happening in the industry. But the more you can do right away, I think is better. I mean, you can get your private pilot still working full time. It's, a lot of people do it. So why not do that and have a plan to put some money away, figure out a plan where you can get a good paying, maybe part-time job, as you get a little farther into your career so you can start building your hours. And then, a lot of guys do right now, 500 hours, you can get hired somewhere. You're not going to be making a ton of money, but, a couple years, you're going to, fly some freight or whatever you got to do. And then guess what? You're going to be flying at that regional. So, knowledge is power. And I think getting into it and doing it is the best way to gain that knowledge. So, you got to get yourself around the financial
Got to.
aspect
Yeah.
of it.
I mean, you definitely need I talked to someone before, I think it was Jeremy Groden, and he was talking about how he came up with a financial plan. He figured out, he like mapped everything out. Like, this is how much it's going to cost. This is how much I don't want to go over. And then he mapped out how much he's going to save to pay off what he needs to pay off and be debt free by the end, and come out with that map and see if that works for you and your family. Cause I mean, this is a decision that you can't make on your own if you are married or if you have a fiance or a very serious girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever it is. You have to, cause this takes a toll on a family, man. I mean, like, it's not easy. As you know, training's not easy. You have to pretty much drop anything on a nice day to go fly. So you got to get your time in. And then your first couple jobs. I mean, I flew aerial survey, I flew freight. I was gone a lot, crappy hours, crappy conditions, crappy planes. Like, I mean, it's a lot, and it's a lot you got to do. And I mean, it's definitely something to think of when you're making that switch. And you were talking, keep going.
It can't be a snap decision. I think, like what you said, mapping it out is you've got to have like a very well thought out plan and really got to stick to it, especially if there's a family involved. I mean, there's just no getting around that, but it absolutely can be done. I want to throw another thing in there that maybe for a little bit for guys on the younger side, this is something I was surprised to find out when I went to the community college. Most of the guys I was in there with were former military, as was I. Now, when I was in, unfortunately, it was before 9/11. So back then, the GI Bill you had to opt into. Since then, you basically get it automatically. So these guys, all former military of some sort, even if they just did a one contract, like 4-year commitment, they had a GI Bill. GI Bill pays for all that. Pays for their flight time, pays for their classes, pays for the books. I mean, and they could even get payment for housing as well. So if I'm 18, 20, 22, maybe even 25, I'm going to the military 4 years, get my GI Bill, and then going to a community college like this is probably the least expensive way to do it. I know there's, you went to Ohio State, I went to Western Michigan, great programs. Those programs aren't cheap, though. No,
not at all.
And not that this one is, but as far as getting a good education, I think, in my opinion, getting into aviation, going to community college route, this certainly isn't the only one that does it via the GI Bill. That's the way to do it. Yeah. I mean, there's no better route that I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, if you can find someone to pay for your schooling, and if, like you said, the military, which obviously the military is not for everyone, but if the military is something that you can see yourself doing, or even if you make a pros and cons list and you think you can suck it up for 4 years to get some money to pay for your flying, it might be worth it. So definitely check out that. There are a ton of options for you to fund your flying. It's just whether or not you are willing to put in the time or the work or whatever you need to do to get that funding, if that makes sense. So whether it's the military, finding scholarships, just going as crazy as you can to figure out a way to pay for it, there are some options for you as well. And it's just something you got to do to make that switch.
And at least now, like if you do everybody comes out of college with some sort of student debt these days. But at least now when you come out, you're making like a living wage, and it's not like it was back in the day when I opted out. At least you are making a little bit of money, and then it's not too far down the road where you're going to be comfortable. You're going to be able to pay those debts off pretty quickly, more than likely. So at least that has come back around and is a little closer to where it should be, probably.
Yeah. No, I mean, you can definitely make a living wage your first year at a regional airline. So I'm glad that that's where the industry is now, because 18 grand a year. And I've talked with a couple pilots, and they're sleeping on benches, shaving in bathrooms, brushing their teeth. It's like, it's not a good look to have your pilot sleeping on a bench. It's like, I don't really know if I want to fly with someone that's sleeping on a bench, So it's good.
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
And you said that you started doing your private pilot training while you were still working full time, correct?
I did. Yeah.
You said it was about 2 years in, and you still didn't have the check ride or the certificate. Talk to me about the challenges of doing your training while you were working full time, and kind of the things that can kind of maybe make it a little harder for you. Cause I know when I was doing football, when I was flying, I kind of just kept making excuses about how tired I was or how busy I was, and I couldn't do it. But in reality, if I could have probably set a little bit more time apart. But talk to me a little bit about how it went with you.
Yeah, no, I what you just said is exactly right. I found myself making excuses as well. So availability on the weekends wasn't a problem. Availability during the week is a problem.
Yeah.
I had like whatever, probably an hour commute home if I wanted to fly in the afternoon. And, my boss was like, well, just set aside, one day a week where you're going to take off early in the afternoon. Like, well, that sounds great in practice, but then it's like Thursday and the phone's ringing and there's a thunderstorm coming in and, but, it is easier to make the excuse not to get out to the field and get in the plane. And, that's why it drug out for me is when I decided to push it and I'm going to get this done, then I got it done. And it was flying, I had to re-solo like 3 different times. I flew the school I was at flies light sports. I was in 3 different kinds of light sports because, started out, they had 2 of this kind, but then that one went down and they sold the other one. So, okay, let's move over to this one over here. And a little bit of a learning curve every time you do that. And then lo and behold, winter comes around and you haven't flown in 60 days and you're not starting back at square one, but you're back a few pegs, that's for sure. So
definitely winter in the Midwest is not very helpful for private pilot training at all.
No, it's the last couple of weeks have been so frustrating to try to get up, and it reminds me of that. But I tell you, the most frustrating thing so far in my aviation career was trying to do my private pilot while working full time. Yeah. It's just tough. But once I got re-soloed again, I said, I am so close right now, and just said aviation for the next 90 days is going to trump everything. Once I did that, then it really fell right into place. But you're right. It's easy to make the excuses, and it's Thursday at 2, and man, I probably need to get out there, but I really can't. I can go up Saturday. Well, then, here comes the low pressure system Friday night, and you're not flying Saturday. And so that was very frustrating. It drug out. I had close to 100 hours when I got my private pilot. And I don't say that with pride. I say that that's my story. Yeah. And,
doesn't mean you're a worse pilot than the guy that got it at 40 hours. There's no difference between a 40-hour private pilot and a 100-hour private pilot, except maybe some more experience. You might have more experience about what's going on. And there's no issue with taking 100 hours or 70 hours or however long it takes you to get your private pilot license. Don't try to rush into it wanting to be getting it done as fast as possible, which I know people do. You can get yourself in some trouble if you do that.
Yeah, I wouldn't be completely comfortable with doing like a one of the crash courses for private pilot. I was happy at the end of the day, once it's all done, like to have the 100 hours in and have flown 3 or 4 different kinds of planes. Like, all right, I feel better about, getting up in this thing and taking my fiance up. And that's actually one of the first things I did when I got my private pilot license was I took my girlfriend up in a plane, and she came down as my fiance. So that was
no way. That's awesome.
Yep. So that was awesome.
Did you film it and put it on YouTube like everyone else is doing?
No, didn't do that.
You could have been a YouTube star.
Yeah, we missed that opportunity, but we certainly have a nice story to tell people how we got engaged. So
that's cool.
But, getting the private pilot while working, it's tough.
It is.
It's tough. I think probably one of the better ways to maybe a better way to go is, you get most of the way into it, and then you find a way to take a couple of weeks off, and you just finish, your last few flights. You get your long cross countries in, and you get up with your instructor a few times and try to get that check right in. When you've been flying 3-4 times a week for a couple weeks in a row, but up into that, you fly when you can fly, but it's easy to let it drag out. Plus, you're like, man, that last cross country was like $400, and so.
Or you scare yourself. A lot of times, the crosswind was a little strong for what you wanted, and you scared yourself. You did a wheelie for a while, and you don't feel comfortable. And then that kind of you're like, maybe this isn't meant for me. Maybe I'm not a good enough pilot. Maybe I'm not good enough to do that. That definitely, I've heard of private pilots or people that are training that just scare themselves and they don't want to get back in the plane. But the only way to get over that and become a better pilot is to get back in the plane.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So talk about your training a little bit. Did you have any difficulties with any certain subjects or flying, any maneuvers or anything, or was it pretty smooth sailing?
It was fairly smooth sailing. I guess my biggest issue is the classic issue everyone has is, just feeling the flare, in getting into your landings. I mean, that was really not that everything was just so easy for me, but that was the one thing that just really took. It's really frustrating because my first solo landing to this day is like one of the best landings I've ever had, and then did two more, and they progressively got worse. That day. Yeah. And then it's like, it's just like been a work in progress ever since then. So I think that's everyone's story, but didn't really have too many problems. I had a great instructor.
That's good. That helps a lot.
Yeah. And we just roll, but didn't have too much of a problem with anything else. It's just, once I dedicated, put the time in, it all came together rather well. But just landing. That's, for new pilots out there, like, your landings is going to always something you're going to be working on from what I can see.
Got over 3,000 hours and every landing's different. I mean, there'll be a stretch of 4 weeks where I have every landing is amazing, and then I'll have a stretch of a week where every landing's like, oh my gosh, how what is happening? And but it just kind of comes and goes. It's a technique, it's a style, it's a skill. But it's always changing. There's always something other kind of factor that you have to take into consideration, and it's just always changing. So it's something that you can never truly perfect, but you can continue to work on and just try to make everyone as best as possible.
Yep. That's right. That's kind of how I look at it. It's always a work in progress, and you're always learning how to do it a little better, and it takes practice. I get up in the pattern, and that was one of the things when you're a private pilot is you just spend so much time in the pattern, banging those landings, and then you want to get away from that, but you still need to do that just to keep the edge on, making good, safe landings.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. And don't be afraid of a crosswind. Obviously you have some limitations on yourself, but don't be afraid to fly into some crosswinds, and because that's how you get better. You get better with practice, and you get better with continually putting yourselves in kind of new territory or new situations where you can learn from what's going on around you.
And I think it's been helpful. So a friend of mine, we just bought a Piper Cherokee about a month ago for me to use as a time builder, and he's going to get his instrument rating in it. And so he had time in the type and I didn't. So I called my CFI up and we went up, just in the pattern for a few times just so he could sign me off. But I found that so beneficial to go back up with him again, just to hear the things I'd heard him say 100 times before, and give me some tips on what was a new plane for me. But, I think that's for anyone, if you need some help in a crosswind landing, just spend the money and spend an hour with the CFI, because you can't critique yourself.
No.
That's really hard to do because you're there in the moment, but he's sitting over there looking at you and he knows exactly what's going wrong. Yeah.
He'll be laughing at you all the way down and be like, what are you doing?
Absolutely. That's the point, and that's what, so I was surprised at how helpful I found going back up with him again.
Yeah. Don't be afraid of getting more instruction at all. I mean, just because you're a private pilot or just because you have your certificates doesn't mean you're a perfect pilot, and doesn't mean that an instructor with less time than you can't teach you something that you don't already know or can't help you perfect your skills. So definitely don't be afraid of that as well. And I like how you said that, it's interesting that you went the route to buy an aircraft with your buddy. Kind of talk about that. Is that going to be your plan to time build? What is kind of your goal with owning the plane?
It is definitely to time build. I'm not sure that's going to be the only way I time build, but we had gotten into like a fractional ownership club last year that has a light sport that one of the types I had flown in quite a bit, and we were banging that around the skies for a little while, and we ended up actually taking that down to the Bahamas last December, and
sweet.
that was quite a trip. Man, that's
how long of a flight was that?
Well, so it takes a day to get down to Florida, and then you can skip over to the Bahamas pretty quick from there. We spent 3 nights in the Bahamas, and then flew back to Florida and then made it back in a day from Florida again. But that was the way back. That was like a 10-hour day.
It's a long time in a light sport aircraft.
Yeah, all hand flying. 10 hours. It was that last trip back was something else. But what the lesson learned for us was, we got. The problem in a light sport is they're very, very sensitive to the winds, and so we had laid out. We knew what the winds were supposed to kind of always be out of the southeast pretty much the whole time,
mm-hmm.
and so there's a lot of airports over in Bahamas.
There are. Been there.
and so we were finding all the strips that were going to be into the wind. Like, this isn't going to be that big of a deal as long as we're into the wind, which would have been the case, but we ran into some real crappy, right as we had gotten to Freeport, which we weren't going to land at because it was a crosswind.
Mm-hmm.
We were going to go couple airports down, because all you have to do, your first airport's just got to be an airport of entry, and they'll check you in.
Mm-hmm.
And there are several of those. So we were going to go to like the next one to get a little better wind situation. Well, the weather closed in on us, and it was all of a sudden like pretty much darn near IFR conditions. So I wasn't flying at the time. My buddy was. He had to whip it around and skedaddle back to Freeport, which was just off of our wing. Anyway, but so he had to land into a 50-knot crosswind.
There you go.
And it was not pleasant. So, that's the rated, tested limits of those planes. And
mm-hmm.
I don't, we don't want to do that again. So we're like, next time we do this, we're going to have our instrument ratings and be able to fly through that crap.
Yeah, that's
good. That's what we wanted to do. He wants to get his instrument rating. I had quite a bit of training. I'm signed off. I haven't taken my check ride yet, but so we really wanted to find something for me to use as a time builder and for him to be able to do his training and check right in.
Oh, cool.
So we found this instrument rated Piper Cherokee, and it's got all the nice stuff in it, all a little antiquated, but everything still works, and actually has one of the earlier GPSs on it that works quite well. And
nice.
So yeah, be spending a lot of time in that here in the next year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah, sounds like it. Now, do you use ForeFlight a lot with when you're flying?
Oh yeah. I mean, we just laugh, and once we discovered ForeFlight, and we run 2 iPads, and he's got the Stratus, so we can run the synthetic vision. And,
cool.
Yeah, we've got all the bells and whistles as far as that goes, and it is funny, because I try to use the at least the in-plane GPS so I can navigate off the ball, that sort of thing. Because I think that helps, with your skills if you're trying to shoot and approach it, things like that. But
Definitely.
it's so funny to just have ForeFlight right there, and just everything's just at your fingertips.
Yeah,
I mean,
the situation awareness that it provides is an amazing tool, an amazing product.
We used that. We had it when we went down to the Bahamas, and every flight plan is a great flight plan until you get in the air, and then you just throw it out the window and figure out how you're really going to get there. And yeah, I mean, that's what we did. The guy flying was flying, and the guy in the right seat was on the other iPad figuring out the new route to get around whatever weather was ahead of us, and it's weather. It's, you can get all the AWOS information, you can get all the runway information, and it is unbelievable. I think back to when I was starting in aviation, back when I was 18, and how you had to navigate then, and that sort of thing. Like this is just revolutionary. I mean, it's just
it's incredible.
The accuracy of the GPS on those things, and the fairly up to date weather, and all the information at your hands. All the charts are right there. I mean, unbelievable.
Yeah, it's absolutely changed the game. I for the company I am now, I don't need to have ForeFlight because we have iPads that they provide for us, and we actually have Jeppesen on there, which is now the same family as ForeFlight since Boeing just bought ForeFlight. So which will be interesting to see kind of what goes on with that. But ForeFlight is just steps and bounds above what Jeppesen offers right now. And before Boeing bought ForeFlight, they actually have a partnership with ForeFlight, and ForeFlight's been helping them revolutionize their own product. So ForeFlight has forever changed the game, changed the industry, changed everything. Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what Boeing's going to do with ForeFlight, and hopefully they don't change too much. Let them kind of have their freedom to continue to create amazing products.
Yeah, the one interesting part to me is the difference. I mean, we always joke like we've got this whatever $500 iPad with a $100 ForeFlight subscription here on our control yoke or in our lap, and that gives us the most accurate information you can get pretty much. I mean, you connect it up to the Stratus and you're WASP capable and all that stuff, but yet you can't use it to navigate officially because it's not connected to the plane.
Right.
And I'm just wondering, when is that bridge going to get gapped? Because I do understand it, but it just seems like there's got to be some middle ground there that you don't, because what's the option? Okay, you can buy a GPS for your plane for $48,000 and then spend another 8 or 10 to get it installed. I mean, it's crazy.
It is. I mean, the FAA moves very slowly if you haven't figured that out already. So I mean, I'm sure it's in the works, and I'm sure it's going to take a lot of partnerships between plane operators and people that make the planes and the people that make the gyros and the instruments. So I'm sure it will be here in the future. So hopefully it will be here in the future, and hopefully this will help speed things up and get that going.
Yeah. I did notice as far as not GPS, but the ADS-B, I think it was out. Yeah, ADS-B out. Over in Europe, they do allow like a handheld, like this one of those little units, like the little Stratus like we have in our plane. It's like the same size unit. You suction cup onto your window. Doesn't have to be a part of the plane, like it has to be part of the transponder here. So I thought that was interesting. They were a little more lenient on that than we are here. But
EASA and the FAA, everything's different. Everything's a little strange. And you think with ICAO and they'd want everything to be the same, but there's always these little things that are just continually going to be different. Let's talk about a little bit of the challenges of owning a plane. Do you think it has been worth it so far? I know that some people say the best part of owning a plane is the day you buy it and the day you sell it. Kind of talk about what it's like to own a plane, the maintenance, kind of the issues of like when something breaks, it all falls on you instead of the flight school. Go ahead and talk a little bit about that.
Well, we're still a little new into it, so I certainly don't consider myself an expert in it, but the buying process, I think, introduces you to the ups and downs of owning a plane. We had a kind of a difficult buying process just because it was going through a broker. We were trying to dot our I's and cross our T's, and we got an attorney involved, and that ended up maybe not being the best call, because that kind of threw a wrench to the whole thing. But we've enjoyed it so far, because coming off of the club that we were in, they were just really strapped because of all the maintenance going into that plane. And the reason for it, that particular plane, that club was formed to have a light sport aircraft. So that's gentlemen or ladies that can only get their sport pilot license, will have something to fly. But turns out those things are pretty maintenance intensive as well.
Go figure.
So, so we've really enjoyed that with the Piper, because we got, when we bought it, we went ahead and had the 100-hour done and had the wing spar inspection done. That's, being batted around the FAA, like they're going to have some airworthiness requirements coming forward on that, and we got corrosion coating done and all that kind of at the same time. So we've enjoyed having the power of making the decisions for things like that, and not having to go back to the committee and that sort of thing. So we've enjoyed it so far, and we got it with the engine only had 450 hours on it. Okay. So, we really did our homework, we felt like, and we will charge ourselves an hourly rate. So we start putting money away so that when the engine comes up, we'll have money for that, and also money for, the ongoing maintenance and things like that. But, we just like having the control of, if we want to rip out some avionics and put some new in there, and it's not ADS out capable yet. Obviously that's got to happen. So we're trying to figure that out. And that's fun to us. Spending the money isn't fun, but
no, definitely not.
I think I understand the saying, and it's like the same thing with the boat, but I went into it with a partner that was a good friend that was very knowledgeable in these things, and we tried to make ourselves as smart as possible on it. And we did have the understanding that it's not just putting oil and gas in the thing. That there's other expenses involved, and so it's been great so far. Maybe I won't say that in a year, but I don't know. We love that thing, and we just chomp at the bit to get that thing up in the air. So
it should be.
It's just been so fun so far, and
good.
And but we did have a bank account, both of us, that could handle it. It's not like we bought the plane and didn't have anything left. We know there's expenses that's going to be involved, and we'll be okay.
Good.
The hour, for us having an instrument capable. See, that's a difference. Like, so my school, if you want to do instrument training, it's in the 172s, and it's $135 an hour plus your instructor.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as we're figuring out what we're going to charge ourselves, it's not going to be we're $135 an hour. I mean, it'll be, I don't know, 45 dry. So we'll put our own gas in it, but, we'll be spending maybe a third and booking that money away, to pay for the upcoming maintenance and things like that. But it's just not going to be anywhere near what you have to pay, and the problem, some of the problem is those planes are in commercial service, so they have to have 100 hours, and they have students in them all the time. So I'm sure the insurance is astronomical, and in fact, our school made us have our own renter's policy, and the policy on our plane is about the same as what I was paying for my renter's policy.
Oh, wow.
So that was a surprise. I thought insurance was going to be very expensive, and it's really not.
That's good.
So, but yeah, so far so good. Love it. Wish we had done it earlier, and found the right plane for us. It looks like, so we're very happy.
That's awesome. I mean, it's definitely, if you have the money to do it and you have the finances and you have the ability to do it, it's definitely probably one of the best ways to go about building your hours. So it's definitely a good call. And one thing I wanted to talk about as well was hang on, I just lost my track of thought. Hang on one second. All right. One thing I wanted to talk about was talk about kind of your goal, talk about your plans. I mean, I always ask this question to people, and it's great to say that this is exactly what's going to happen step by step by step. But as we know, life, that's not how it goes. But as of now, talk to me about kind of like your grand old plan, kind of what you envision for your career.
Yeah, I didn't have one for quite a while. Was just kind of seeing what the options were and trying to. I had a real hard time. I mean, I was getting on blogs and stuff, and just trying to figure out, how do you become, like a corporate pilot, and are the airlines really as bad as what everyone says they are, and that whole thing. So I just kind of did some research and read stuff online, and then going to the community college, getting that done was a huge help. So my plan right now, and it's always fluid, is to interview with a local regional. A lot of times, once you get your instrument rating, you can interview with them, and if that were to go well, they will make you a job offer, and you have 5 years to get your hours in. And as soon as you get your hours in, then you're off and running with them. And I think that's the route that I'm going to pursue. I'd like to find someone. I'm in the Baltimore area, so I can fly out of any of the three around here, which is huge opportunity. Yeah. So there's plenty of regionals that have crew bases around here. So I want to stay local for now, and start out a regional and see where it goes. I went to last fall. There was a military officers association had like a job fair down in DC, and I went down there, and there was all kinds of regionals down there. They're looking for the guys coming. They were looking for the guys coming out of the military as pilots, and so I always had to say, look, I'm a former officer, but I'm not didn't fly in the military, but I talked to several guys down there, and again, saw myself in a couple of them. And then there was a gentleman about my same age, and he was a captain at a regional, and he's like, I'm just flying every time I can to get as many hours as I can, because I want to go and be with the majors. And I said, why wouldn't you just stay on with the regionals and stay as a captain there? He's like, and he kind of went through it with me, and there is a lot better money to be made if you can get there in time. So
for sure.
That's what I'm looking at. I started out thinking, I really want to be a corporate pilot, and I know that's where you've made it too. But I like with my age the little more straight line. I can see probably how it's going to lay out a little bit better. It seems a little bit more like, you get this many hours in as an FO, then you're going to be a captain. And then, this many hours in, you can start looking at going to the majors. So I kind of like that. Little less haziness to the career path, I think, is probably definitely a better fit for me at this point. If I was a younger man, I probably wouldn't be saying that. But
yeah, no, it definitely is. The airlines are kind of like, all right, you get to 1,500 hours, you go to a regional, you sit at a regional for this long, you have your seniority number at a major airline, so you'd be here for this long. It's kind of just like, it's like a ladder. It's like, all right, you're going up the next step, then you go up the next step, then you go up the next step. Or corporate, it's like there's so many different companies and you can go so many different places and you can have an idea of what they want, but the one place you want might require 2,500 hours. Once you get 2,500 hours, oh, sorry, we're not hiring right now. So it's kind of like, or we're shutting down, or you got the job and then they sell the plane, then you lose your job. And it's like kind of, it's kind of like, what do you do? So the corporate life is definitely a little more murkier on how you get in there. But I mean, I went into this whole career path with my eyes set on the airlines, major airline, American Airlines, because that's where my dad was. I kind of just thought that's the only path you can go. I always thought the only real way to be a successful pilot or to finally say you're a true pilot is flying for the airlines. But I've quickly learned that is not true and that you can have a great career no matter what you do. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely paths for everyone in every single route that you want to go. So definitely do the research to find which one is right for you. And at the time right now, like we talked about, life changes a lot of things. This might be the best one because you never know. Tomorrow you might go to your plane and someone might be standing outside and be like, hey, I want to buy a hangar and I need to put my Falcon in here. Oh, how much time do you have? Oh, why don't you sit right seat when it's like, so things just kind of things change. It's a very fluid industry and things change very fast. So I mean,
and I would be wide open to that.
Exactly. So it's good to have a plan, but never turn down like a great opportunity or something like that. Like always say yes to go fly. I mean, if it's a safe environment and a safe place to go, always say yes to go fly.
Yep.
But
I mean, I think, if I could be so bold and look 20 years down the road, I mean, I'd regional, major, get done with that, and then get a part-time contract job, banging people around Florida. That would be like,
Well, hey, you can fly seaplanes in Florida for Tropic Airways. They fly seaplanes from Florida to the Bahamas.
I follow those guys. I heard that podcast. And when we flew in the Bahamas, I don't know if it was their planes, but we did see some flow planes back there. And then there's a DC-3 that flies back and forth from Miami out to the Bahamas, and we were chasing him at one point. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, those guys they don't have it so bad, man.
No, they got a good little lifestyle. Yeah, it's not bad. Landing on the water in the Bahamas, it got to be a pretty fun job.
There is nothing wrong with that. Yeah, I love seaplanes. That's a bucket list rating.
Definitely.
Love to figure that out.
Well, like you said, you never know how your career is going to go. So like you said, always keep it open.
That's right.
Well, David, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. I think your story is just really going to resonate with a lot of people that listen to this podcast or a lot of people that follow Pilot to Pilot. It's so many people love aviation and just continually get blocked at the fact that it's so much money, or maybe it's too late for them, or maybe it's not going to work out in their family situation. And I think that your story is going to help people know it's like, hey, he can do it. It's kind of like you said, you met someone that's older than you that is going after this, and you saw him be able to do it. You felt like you could do it. So maybe someone that's 25 is going to see you be like, hey, I can do it. So, I mean, it's just it's going to be a snowball effect. And I think that your story is definitely going to be one that needs to be told. And I'm very thankful that you let me tell it today. Before we go, I just want you to kind of give 3 main tips. I know we kind of briefly touched on it before, but just give kind of like your 3 tips to someone that is thinking about making the switch and kind of the 3 most important things that they should do before they make the switch.
The first one is, I think, the one that everyone says, but it's the most correct, is just get started. So go down, take that initial $100 ride at the local at your local airport that has some sort of school there, and make sure it is for you if you haven't been up in a small plane. So that'll either go one of two ways. You'll either hate it or you'll love it. You'll probably love it, and then you'll have the bug, and then it'll go from there. So that's obviously number one. I think number two is a long-term plan. I like what you said about one of the other podcasters where he laid out the plan, and doesn't matter your age or what your goal is. Long-term plan is so hugely important to understand how you're going to get from A to B. And you can't, it doesn't matter if you're just trying to be a private pilot, if you're doing something like what I'm doing, you can't just jump into it. There's so much information out there right now, thank God for the internet. You really can figure stuff out. What's it going to cost? How long is it going to take? What are my options? So put a plan together. And so part 3 goes along. Part 2 is do your research. Like I said, there's so much information out there. And I've gained a lot just from, listening to guys like you on your podcast. I follow all kinds of different aviation people on Instagram, and I've learned so much about the industry just by doing that. Yeah. That's helped me. Like I said, I didn't have a plan for a long time because I just couldn't figure it out. But, having followed people, listened to podcasts, read stuff online, it kind of comes together. You can kind of formulate. So, take advantage of the information that's out there, and that will help you to formulate your plan. But step number 1 is just to get started. Get that first ride. If you love it, then just start going on your private pilot. If you can only do it, 1 or 2 flights on the weekends, just do that. That's fine for now. That's what I did. That got me there. Yep. So that's what I'd say.
Perfect. Well, David, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I truly appreciate it. And like I said before, I think that this is going to help a lot of people. So I appreciate it. And hopefully we can have you back on when you can tell me that you're sitting right seat at your regional airline. So, I mean, it's definitely a story that you got to tell, and it's definitely a story that you're going to continue to build on. So good luck with everything. And I hope it all pans out the way you want it to.
Great. Thanks, Justin.
No problem.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Have a great day.
Okay.
Aviation, that is a wrap for episode number 53. Like I said earlier, if you enjoyed today's episode, please check out our website, leave us a review on iTunes, check out our Patreon page, patreon.com/pilotthepilot, or check us out on Instagram @pilotthepilot and Twitter @pilotthepilot. Aviation, if you would like to be on an episode of the Pilot the Pilot podcast, please email me at pilotthepilothq@gmail.com. Happy flying, Aviation.